So, to carry us forward with this concept of trust, it's come up a lot. And fortunately, here at Kellogg, we have some answers for you. My colleague Ken Grayson has been leading, among many other things, something called the Trust Project for Northwestern. And he's going to share a little bit about what he's been finding, he and his colleagues have been finding about how to help trust happen within organizations. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for inviting me here today. This is my first time at Kin, so thank you to you seasoned Kinians for opening your arms. So when I was 11 or 12 years old, one of the things I really like to do is to go into the office with my dad to work on a Saturday, because his office was 2 or 3 blocks from a magic store. I loved magic when I was a kid. It was a little hole-in-the-wall store. It was called How'd You Do That Magic. It had the sign had like a black top hat and a rabbit coming out of it. And the guy, when you walk in, the guy who ran the store would be behind a glass countertop, like at a jewelry store. And I walk in, and as soon as I walk in, as soon as anyone would walk in, the first thing he would say is, "Hey, want to see something? You want to see something?" And I'd walk up to the glass countertop, and he'd show me a magic trick. He'd take a regular deck of cards and he'd turn it into all Queen of Hearts. Be like, "How'd you do that?" And he'd take me step by step through how he'd do the magic trick. He'd show me how, with a little bit of practice, and if I bought that trick deck of cards, I could turn a regular deck of cards into all Queen of Hearts. You can see he was a really good salesman. I spent a lot of my allowance at that store. I spent a lot of time at that store, too. One of the things I like to watch when I was in there is how he would deal with the skeptics. Because not everyone who came into the store was willing to walk up to that glass countertop when he said, "Hey, you want to see something?" Usually the reaction was, hand up, and tight smile. "No thanks, I'm just looking." Because most of us, when somebody we don't know says, "Hey, you want to see something?" We automatically have a bunch of reasons why the answer is no. Because we know they're just trying to be friendly. They probably want something from us. They probably want to sell us something. And we're nervous that we're going to get the short end of the stick. Like we're going to end up buying a crappy magic trick we don't want. It's going to cost $60. But this guy was really good at breaking through that skepticism and that suspicion. He was really good at guessing what might interest people coming into the store and how he could help. So he'd size people up, and he might say something like, "Oh, if you're looking for a gift for a kid, I've got an easy trick that they'll love to learn." Or, "Come on over here, this is a great trick you can show your friends next time you're at the bar." As you look at what he was doing, I sort of got a sense that as he was communicating to you, it wasn't just, you can trust me, but it was also a recognition that, I know you're skeptical, and I know I'm trying to sell you something, and I know you don't want to believe this, but if you just trust me with your time, I'll make it worth your while. Now, in my adult life as a researcher, I've been focusing a lot on trust. And I think the real trick that this guy was able to do is to build trust. Building trust is like magic, because when people trust us, they're willing to kind of let down their guard. They're willing to listen to what we have to say. Really, they'll come up to our glass countertop and hear what we have to offer. Building trust is like magic because when people trust us, they are willing to believe in things that they wouldn't otherwise believe in. Like, I can make a drone that will pick a human being off a burning building and save them. So, now, everyone in this room, I think, is good at building trust. You wouldn't be here today if you weren't already good at it. And you could be put in charge of a brand or a region or an entire company, And you can inspire trust in the people who work for you, the people who work with you, the people who invest in you, the people who buy from you. And you're just really good at convincing people that if you just trust me with your time or with your money, I'll make it worth your while. And trust researchers like me, for the past 20 years or more, have been coming up to people like you and saying, how'd you do that? Take me step by step through the process of how you build trust. And let's get some insights from that. Let's test the insights. Let's do some experiments or do some surveys. And let's see what we can come up with in terms of some generalizable information or conclusions. And I'd like to share with you just a little bit of some of those results here today. One of the problems that trust researchers faced when we first started studying trust is that trust means different things in different contexts. So the trust that you have in your plumber, for example, is going to be different than the trust you have in your daycare provider, and that's going to be different than the trust you have in your news organization. And so we've learned that it's not so informative to just know whether a brand is trusted or whether a manager is trusted. Scale of 1 to 10, do you trust this brand, do you trust this manager? And it's actually more helpful to know or to break trust down into 3 building blocks. I guess it's kind of like pad thai. 3 ingredients. So let me tell you what these building blocks are. The first one is not fish sauce. So the first one is what Jason was just talking about just now, which is honesty. So this is the trust that we build when what we say, what we communicate, matches with reality. We build trust by telling the truth and by keeping our promises. The second building block is benevolence. So this is the trust we build when we show that we have other people's best interests at heart. When we show that we're not just trying to get stuff for us, trying to make sure the deal's good for us, but we want to make sure that the deal is good for them as well, and that they're not going to get a raw deal. The third building block is competence. Now, competence is the trust we build when we know the skills that are required for the job, and we meet or exceed expectations for those skills. Now, people can be really good on all 3 building blocks. They can be really bad, or brands can be really good or really bad. But it's actually the case that for most managers and most brands, they're different on the different building blocks. And to show you why that's useful to know or useful to understand, I'm just going to focus on 2 of the building blocks. I'm going to focus on benevolence, and I'm going to focus on competence. So I'm sure you've had people who have worked for you who you really trust in terms of competence. They really have the skills for the job. If you need a programming problem solved, you go to them. But among those people, despite their high competence, maybe you don't have as much trust in their benevolence. Maybe you don't think they have the company's best interests at heart, or maybe their team's best interests at heart. They're the kind of person who leaves at 4 o'clock when there's a big project due and lets their team kind of pick up the slack and stay till 8 o'clock to do the rest of the work. And by the same token, I'm sure you've known people who are really benevolent. They really care about the team and the company. They're really willing to put their shoulder into the work, but when they do, you don't have as much trust in their competence, in their technical skills. So I hope you can see, if somebody says they don't trust a brand or they don't trust their manager, that's something. But I'd want to know, okay, is it because of low competence, or because of low benevolence, or because of low honesty, or a combination, or are they different? Now, I think many of the organizations that are represented here today, you measure trust in one form or another. You might measure how your managers are trusted internally. You might measure how your brands are trusted. You might measure how your customer service reps are trusted. But the question I have for you is, are you measuring trust? Are you thinking about trust in terms of the 3 building blocks? And just to give you another example, a real example now of why it's useful to think about the building blocks, I want to talk about a project I worked on in the United Kingdom with a financial advisory service. Now, this is a company that sells personal financial advice to individuals, families who are preparing for their retirement. And they were one of the leading providers of independent financial advice in the UK. And they were interested in how they did on trust. How were they perceived in terms of trust? And they had been measuring it, but they hadn't been thinking about the 3 building blocks. And so we ran a big survey of their customers, competitors' customers, and potential clients. We asked a bunch of questions, including the 3 building blocks: benevolence, honesty, and competence. And what this firm learned is that they were above average in terms of competence. Maybe that's one reason why they were such a leading firm. But when it came to benevolence and honesty, they were only average. In fact, one thing we learned from that survey is that generally speaking in this marketplace, all of the major competitors were about the same in terms of benevolence and honesty. And so this company thought they saw an opportunity for differentiation, particularly as they thought about their corporate culture, which was a very caring corporate culture. They thought they could differentiate on benevolence and honesty and maybe improve their business. So we identified 6 or 8 things that financial advisors did to communicate the genuine benevolence that this company felt for customers and the honesty with which they approached their operations. We did a big training program to help the financial advisors communicate that better in the marketplace. And I wouldn't be telling you this story if it wasn't a success story. It was. They were able to improve their benevolence and honesty, or perceptions of benevolence and honesty in the marketplace. And over the next 2 years, they gained significant market share. The average value of new clients improved by 40%. And because of those gains, they almost doubled their financial advisor sales force over that 2-year period. So the one message is, if you're measuring trust, if you're thinking about trust explicitly as part of your corporate strategy, it's helpful, if you're not doing it already, to think about the 3 building blocks: benevolence, honesty, and competence. Now, if you're not measuring, if you're not thinking about trust as part of your corporate strategy, I mean explicitly talking about it in meetings and thinking about how you manage trust, well, I'd like to encourage you to make it an explicit part, to make it part of your conversation at the senior level and throughout the organization. And the reason I say that is because I think that as we look to the future, companies that can differentiate themselves in terms of trust are going to have a unique competitive advantage, because trust worldwide is declining. Let me start in the US. The Gallup organization has been studying trust in institutions and business sectors for 25 years. And over the past 10 years, they've seen significant declines in many institutions and business sectors. In fact, for the past couple of years, trust has reached record lows in some business sectors. If you're a nurse, you don't have to worry about this quite yet. Trust in nurses in the US, 85% of Americans have strong or very strong trust in nurses. Doctors, we're going to drop down to 65%. Business executives, 17%. Advertising and marketing professionals, 11%. And if you're in advertising and marketing, don't feel too bad. Members of Congress, 8%. Now that trend is a decline in general trust in business institutions and business sectors is a worldwide phenomenon. The Edelman Trust Barometer, they've been measuring trust for 15 years. They survey 30,000 people in 28 countries every year. It's a big study, pretty impressive. And they too, over the past 10 years, have been seeing declines in trust. And then in many countries, in many sectors, in many institutions, they are also seeing record lows, particularly among the general population. So just as one figure, on average, the percent of people who trust CEOs as spokespeople for their own company is at 37%. And that's been declining in every country for the past several years. So what does this mean for you? I probably don't have to tell you, because more and more every year, you're dealing with customers who are increasingly skeptical about the communication that we have to them about our products and services. And every year you're dealing with employees who are increasingly suspicious about whether we have their best interests at heart. And it's kind of like we're trying to sell them on our company and on our products. And more people are putting that hand up and giving us that tight smile and saying, no thanks, I'm not interested. In fact, as you probably know, they're not always that polite. At the very whiff of untrustworthy behavior from companies, they're going to jump on social media and very aggressively communicate how a particular company was not honest, was incompetent, or didn't have customers' best interests at heart. So we're going to have to up our trust game. We're going to have to learn new ways to break through that skepticism and suspicion. And listen, like I said, you're already good at building trust. So I would understand why, with all the new things that you have to learn every month, every week, that trust wouldn't be the thing you're thinking, I got to improve at something that I'm already good at. But I think maybe now's the time. Now's a critical time for you to think about adding a few new tools to your toolkit. To think about learning new ways to break through that skepticism and suspicion that I think is going to be growing into the future. As Rob mentioned, I've been working on this trust project at Northwestern University for the past 2 years. We've had a great partner in the telling. Michelle Valkov is here from the production company that we work with. And what the trust project does is it brings together different perspectives on trust. We talk to business leaders about how they faced up to trust challenges. We talk to academics to hear about what their discipline can tell us about trust. And some of you have generously volunteered to be part of this project, and for that we're very grateful. Now, I've been studying trust since the 90s, for 20 years, and in the past 2 years I've learned a lot about trust, a lot of new things about trust. Let me tell you one thing that you might learn if you go to the Trust Project and you watch a video from Adam Waits. He's a psychology professor. He studies trust. And he talks a little bit about a question that psychologists tried to answer in the 80s. They think they have an answer to this question. Let me tell you the answer they've come up. The answer they've come up with. The question is, when people have an overall level of trust in someone, which building block contributes more to that overall level of trust? Is it competence or is it benevolence? They focus on only two, competence and benevolence. So imagine I did a survey in your organization and I asked people 3 questions about you in your organization. First, how much do you trust this person? Second, how competent do you think they are? Do they have the skill set for the job? Do they meet or exceed expectations for those skills? Third, how benevolent do you think they are? Do they have your best interests at heart? Now, through surveys and through experiments, psychologists have learned that yes, perceptions of confidence, of course, influence overall perceptions of trust. But across different contexts and tested in different ways, perceptions of benevolence have twice the influence on overall feelings of trust that perceptions of competence do. Now, I know some of you will look at that relationship and you'll say, that's exactly what I would think. That's how I manage myself. That's how I manage my organization. But I also know that others of you will think, well, that might be true in experiments, or it's not true in every sector, or for me, I'm going to be the exception that proves the rule. I usually lead with competence. If you're skeptical about these results, I encourage you to look at Adam's video. All of the Trust Project videos have 20 or 30 links to original research that will, I think, convince you, in Adam's case, that generally speaking, perceptions of benevolence have a stronger influence on overall trust than perceptions of competence. And then, if you're convinced of that, I want you to ask, are you managing your organization? Are you managing your brands? Are you managing yourself as a leader in a way that recognizes that benevolence has a stronger influence than competence? So, 2 messages for this morning, from me anyway. One is, if you're not explicitly thinking about trust, now's the time to do it. It's getting harder and harder out there to break through skepticism and suspicion. We need better tools for doing that. Second, if you're looking for a tool that will help you kind of move forward, these 3 building blocks I found are very helpful for conceptualizing trust and thinking about managing trust. We want our customers and our employees to trust us. We need them to trust us, because when they trust us, they're willing to believe in things that they wouldn't otherwise believe in. And it's only when we all are willing to believe in something together, investors, customers, employees, executives, it's only when we're willing to believe in something together that we can make really big things happen. Thank you very much.